anywhere, whether in nature or culture, where you see something bizarre, you just have to ask yourself, like, isn't it a result of some really basic causality that just eludes me, all right? Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. Let's talk about the bizarre, okay? So the philosophy of the bizarre, so to speak, or philosophy if you prefer. So why do some things appear bizarre in the first place? And I would argue there are two main reasons for that. So the first simple and very understandable reason is just the lack of exposure. So, for example, if a thing is bizarre, kind of, in itself, but you just deal with it like daily, day in and day out, day in and day out, it stops being bizarre to you at some point, right? Just through the power of habit, through the power of, I don't know, just normality, so to speak. It is normal for you. It is no longer bizarre. But it's understandable, right? However, in this video, we're going to be focusing on the second reason, which is the lack of understanding, I would claim, all right? So, what do I mean by that? So, why do things appear bizarre again? Due to the lack of understanding. Well, things, in the first place, just don't appear out of nowhere, so to speak. If we believe in causality, thing has its reason, right? So things also have their reason. So even something bizarre must have had its reason, supposedly at the very least. So if you know how the thing appeared, if you know the causal link, you would understand why it is the way it is, which is almost the antithesis for it appearing bizarre to you. So basically it is understanding. You may even feel some compassion or, I don't know, even pity maybe towards the thing, if it's a living thing, for example, right? It would be completely known to you and would cause no questions. So that only if you see the causal link, which made it appear in the sense come into being, not in the sense of like looking the way it's looking, right? So hence we may formulate a theorem of what bizarre things are, actually. They are things, the appearance of which, again, in the sense of coming into being, the internal machinery, so to speak, not the outlook, the appearance, I mean, is either unknown or too complex to grasp quickly, all right? So in this sense, the whole mechanics is very close to the mechanics of magic, if you think about it. The mechanics of the bizarre, I mean. And I mean the magic tricks, not the actual magic, though I suspect if it exists, the rules I'll lay out here would also apply in its case as well. So remember this movie Prestige by Nolan, right? So they've explained it at the very beginning. So they have like 3 stages of the trick, right? The first stage is the pledge, where the magician shows you some ordinary object, right? Then the second stage is the turn, as they call it, where the magician takes the ordinary thing and makes it do something extraordinary, so to speak. And the third stage is the prestige, which gave its title to the movie, right? Where the thing is returned into its normal state, essentially, right? Well, for the sake of this video, I'm actually displeased by this sequence, but it was kind of good enough to mention nevertheless. So my sequence would be slightly different. It would only involve 2 stages of Nolan, actually. But I'll insert the middle stage in between them, and the prestige I just ignore. You can watch the movie if you wish, all right? So the first stage, according to philosopher, Eugene the Philosopher, would be we have something understandable, like something relatively simple and easy to grasp. Then we have something unknown, is the second stage. And then the third stage is something bizarre, right? Something misunderstandable, so to speak. So ordinary, understandable, unknown, bizarre, misunderstandable, right? And there's a causal link. It's basically the same thing in some sense, right? Which is basically, by the way, how Nietzsche treated magic. That's exactly what he said, that the magic trick is essentially you are given some initial state, so to speak, then some causality happens which you don't observe, right? And then you are given the final state, And since you don't observe any causality between them, you assume it must be magic. I mean, the turning of the initial state into the final state, right? But the causal link essentially is not missing. It's there, you just don't see it, right? Don't perceive it. It's just invisible to you. So yeah, magic is the example of the bizarre, right? The unnatural, you might think, or you might call it rather, because again, we assume natural things to be causally linked, right? So when we lack this immediate perception of causality, this makes us think about bizarre, right? So until you learn how it's done, it will remain unnatural. You only see the result and not the causal link or the simple understandable things that produce this bizarre thing as the result. So even actually if you think about it, even very natural things may look unnatural if you don't know anything about their nature, right? So, was it Arthur C. Clarke, this famous quote, like, any technology advanced enough is indistinguishable from magic, right? So, advanced enough, meaning you don't see the causality, you just don't understand it, right? So, yeah. And if you think about it, the technology is exactly the causal link between, like, the raw material, roughly speaking, and the product, right? So, if the technology, i.e. the causal link, is, like, well, advanced enough, okay, so it wouldn't be easily grasped, then yeah, the turning of the raw material into the final product would seem kind of insane, kind of magical, right? But anyway, hopefully you get the idea. Other examples would be fractals, right? Fractals have pretty bizarre appearance, whereas how they appear is actually very simple. It's iterative application of some very simple process, right? Some very simple rules. Like think about, I don't know, the typical example of fractal. I mean, there are, of course, these mathematical fractals, like all kinds of trees, the snowflake, the carpet, etc. Like if you've learned any math, you know what I'm talking about. Or where you apply, again, very simple iterative rules and they produce these strange structures. I mean, the Mandelbrot set, I don't know if you call it that in English, but regardless. Also the shorelines, right? So it's iterative process of waves or even wind or both actually, right? Acting. So the same process just applied over and over produces this kind of bizarre feature, right? And the same with living organisms, by the way. If you think about it, living organisms also are based on iteration of the same processes, right? Think about how proteins are produced, right? How the DNA is built. It's an iterative process. It's the, the repeating kind of building sequence, let's put it this way, right? Or how the cells divide. You have one cell, and the rule is divide this cell into two, right? So you divide one cell into two, then you apply the rule to both of these new cells. They also divide into two. You get 4 cells, etc., and it just keeps growing fractally, right? That's where the fractality of the living beings come from. It's not from some sort of, again, quantum electric magic of the universe. Like, I'm sorry, it's just not. It's just simple logic, right? Okay. Remember my video about Wolfram? I mean, if you know anything about Wolfram's theory, he also works with these things, right? He calls it actually the rulead, the set of rules. Exactly these simple rules which produce quite unexpected results with bizarre consequences. So yeah, that's what I'm talking about. But all of it arises naturally, sort of from the bottom up, so to speak, following simple dynamics. It's just that we usually don't see the dynamics, or we don't understand the rules, right? Or we can't really trace them, again, returning to Wolfram with his principle of computational irreducibility, which basically means you don't know the result of the computation, even if the rules are very simple, until you actually do the computation yourself, right? So it's basically a theorem of the bizarre, if you wish, right? So until you see the causal link, you wouldn't be able to connect the beginning to the end, so to speak, right? The causality will be missing, essentially, even though it's there and it's very simple, all right? This is the computational irreducibility of Stephen Wolfram, reformulated very simply in terms of the bizarre, okay? So yeah. we just usually don't see the dynamics. We don't see what happens in the workshop of an artist, so to speak. We only see the result. Right. So the same reasoning applies anywhere else, honestly. So anywhere, whether in nature or culture, where you see something bizarre, you just have to ask yourself, like, isn't it a result of some really basic causality that just eludes me, all right? And some very simple necessity, you know, in the initial conditions, or convenience, perhaps, if we're talking about like living beings, etc., that has evolved along the sequence of these repetitive, perhaps not, steps to produce the bizarre outcome that I'm observing, right? So, and of course, a naive hope of any bona fide, so to speak, researcher is that, yes, there must be such a thing. There must be a sequence that leads from this to this. I mean, the problem with research is actually a lot of times even the initial conditions aren't known, right? We're just presented with the bizarre. So that's why you get the multiplicity of various causalities behind them represented by various models of how this thing comes into being. But regardless, I mean, it's quite a naive hope, but it is a hope, right? That there is some simple causality that we may find. And in case you are able to find it, discoveries like these are among the most inspiring, actually, and the most, well, delightful, uplifting, you know. I actually may talk about one of such discoveries soon. Not mine, of course. It will be some other guy, just like in some of my previous videos, all right? Yeah, and to conclude, I actually want to... Actually, let's conclude again. Bizarre things, there are two reasons for you to... There are two reasons for you to perceive some things as bizarre. First thing is lack of exposure. So, in the sense that some people may not perceive objectively bizarre things as bizarre just because they're used to them, but you may perceive them as such, right? Think about the child growing, right? Everything is new to them, so a lot of things may appear bizarre. Or the second thing is that lack of understanding, right? So we are if we are presented with a situation where the causal link between the initial state and the final state is not clear, even though the initial state may be clear, then the final state would appear bizarre. That's the point of my video. So as an illustration, as an example, if you wish, to what I've just said, to my theory of the bizarre, so to speak, I'll give to you a video of none other than livestock auctioneers, actually, in the United States. So trading livestock. Just look at how they speak, if you may call it that, all right? But you will look at it after this video and will say, aha, I know what you did. Philosopher taught me. Philosopher told me how to perceive, or rather, how to understand the bizarre. I have the framework now. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing.
If you wish to support me, please consider joining my Patreon. That is patreon.com/philosopher. See the link in the description. Or if you have a scientific theory of your own and you'd like my help in developing it, please join my alternative science coaching program, also available through Patreon.